his name, and only one of us is considered healthy today. You're kind of in rough shape today, aren't you, Watson?
Yeah, my Time Lord ran into a square with Saturn, and that rolls me 6.
Classic
And
astrologer's
so
excuse. Blame the planets.
So yeah, I just kind of got stopped. I was really, on a roll, for the previous few weeks. But yeah, I'm up. I just have a bit of congestion today and coughing here and there. So I'll make sure my mic's off if I have to do that. But hopefully we should be able to get through a decent live stream today.
Yeah,
So
look, we've all been there, so yeah, just do what you must to be comfortable
yeah, sure.
and to make this experience bearable, if not thrilling and a total joy. So we aside from your health update, we have some things to tell our listeners, don't we?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to take the lead or
you can take the
okay?
lead? We're the chipmunks again.
Yeah. So basically, we've, Nick and I, over the past, since 2015, we've kind of been a little on and off with doing live streaming together, or rather, podcasts basically. And we kind of did this sort of as an experiment starting before the summer. And so, we've been doing these kind of like informal like discussions, and it's been good. But I think we're kind of getting to the point where we feel like we need to kind of formalize it a little bit. And we have kind of a janky situation happening on YouTube where we have like duplicate copies of the live streams on Nick's channel and my channel. And so we figured it would be a lot easier for all of you viewers to be able to catch up on our past streams if we had just one place for that to go. So we're officially kind of branding these discussions and future discussions as the astrology live stream. A little bit generic, but we're kind of giving it a name, and we're going to have one YouTube channel where future discussions will go, and it'll be sort of a little more produced while still being fresh and off the cuff and interactive and all the things you love about the talk so far. We're just really glad that people are listening to us, and that we're at this sort of point where we feel like we can sort of continue, more formalized. So I'm not sure exactly when we're kind of starting with our first like official episode, but
I thought it was next Sunday. I thought
it might be. Yeah, it may very well be next Sunday.
I thought it was. I'm getting ready for it. I'm preparing.
Yeah. So it's going to be the astrology live stream.
Yeah.
And I already got the domains and everything. So yeah, we'll have kind of one place that it, will be accessible. So hopefully that makes things easier.
And the other thing that we're going to do is, along with the sort of the rebranding and the consolidating on YouTube, we're going to make the episodes more sort of formal, centering around a specific topic. Real Darko Art says the alert set for both, but it takes me to Patrick's channel by default, so I run Nick's on the iPad to avoid favoritism. Well, thank you. Yeah, we'll tweet this out. Thank you, Cosmic Rose. So yeah, we are going to sort of streamline it. We've got a sort of a format where every month we're going to cover, we're going to do some like astrobiographical works. And then we're also going to do, more sort of specific astrology topics. What is Mercury retrograde? What's the deal with Mars and Saturn transits to each other? Things, specific sort of questions like that. And what was the other one?
And like a forecast episode. So
right.
Kind of,
yeah.
So
we're also
doing Sunday of each month will be like our look ahead at the next month's sort of transits. And this is, at least the way I see this, is it's something that gives us some sort of template to have for our discussions. Obviously, if there's something super pressing that we can't afford to ignore, then we will give ourselves the freedom to do that. But otherwise, we're going to have a lot of biographical episodes where we do a really deep dive into maybe like one person's chart, and educational set of episodes where we're like examining a particular question, and then forecast episodes for the transits ahead. So we hope to be able to kind of, because something we've sort of come up across in our past discussions is we kind of hop from topic to topic to topic and nativity to nativity, and it's there's a lot that goes sort of missed. And I think there's a lot of you out there who already know a fair amount about astrology and would like those sort of deep dives that Nick and I can do. So we hope to give ourselves the space to be able to do that.
That's right. So, the astrology biography. So, like two weeks out of every, month, we're going to do deep dive biographies of usually one political figure and one arts figure. Oh yeah, of course we're using the database for this.
So like our first political figure is going to be
Napoleon.
And
Mais je suis Napoleon.
And then our first like arts figure will be Brittany Spears.
That's right, because and that's next week's episode, I'm preparing a Napoleon deep dive episode, and we're going to look at a number of astrological things relating to his life, stuff that we've talked about before. When his chart isn't a perfectly timed chart. So when we have really well-timed charts, like say Brittany, we'll do things like zodiacal releasing, take you through that, techniques that rely more specifically on horoscopic considerations. But then with people like Napoleon, where, okay, we don't have a perfectly timed birth chart, but we have a lot of information. There's still a lot of astrology we can cover. You can still talk about secondary progressions. You can still talk about transits. And we might even sometimes arrive at informal rectifications over the course of those episodes, by some kind of default. Not necessarily the aim, but we might find ourselves doing it anyway. So it's going to be somewhat advanced astrology. Not super duper, too hard for anyone to follow, but if you've read a few books or, listened to a few podcasts, or you generally get the jargon, then you should find what we're doing, interesting. And we'll do our best to make it, as strong as possible. We're very excited about this. And the whole thing about choosing Napoleon and Brittany Spears as our two first subjects, that's also kind of the idea, is we're really going to run the gamut in terms of the kind of people that we talk about. And we want those juxtapositions to be,
astrology works no matter the time period.
Exactly. Yeah. Whether you're talking about a pop star or, some old emperor or whatever the case may be. The astrology is obviously front and center.
And they're straight into the contemporary. There's a new movie about Napoleon, and there's a new biography that Brittany Spears came out with. So it's these are people sort of in part of today's discussion.
That was part of the reason that we arrived at starting with them. Although, I've always wanted to do a Napoleon thing. I've always wanted to do a Britney Spears thing. It just, these it sounds like a good place to start. And, we might take requests, although we have a lot of people sort of on the, a lot of subjects up on the dock to cover. But, if we keep going eventually. So Napoleon, Brittany, not Joaquin Phoenix. I mean, maybe Joaquin at some point. Years ago for Star IQ, I wrote an astrology article about Joaquin Phoenix. We're talking like the year 2000, year 2001. I also wrote an article about Ridley Scott. That's funny. I just realized. If you go to stariq.com, I used to write sort of like pop astrology articles. They were pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I like those a lot.
Yeah, that was really good. That was my first paying job in astrology, working for Rick Levine and Jeff Jower, who at the time, this was before the .com bubble, thought I'd be able to make a living writing pop astrology articles, and that dream lasted about 5 months. But in those 5 months, I got some pretty good work done, and I wrote about Joaquin Phoenix, and I wrote about Ridley Scott. But when I wrote those articles, the latest movie was Gladiator. For either of them, or actually, Joaquin's had the Quills just coming out, or Quills, the movie with Marquis de Sade and all that. So yeah, that's those are people I've covered before. We don't have birth times for either of them, and it's not like Napoleon where you have like just like detailed chronology. So I don't know that I would necessarily do a full deep dive episode on Ridley or Joaquin. Not because I'm a fan of both, but they're not necessarily the people. Like, I have a file on both of them, and I know the chronology of their movie releases, and okay, Joaquin's had some interesting drama in his life, like when he ostensibly quit cinema to become a rapper for that that documentary.
Yeah, that was wild. That was like a Kaufman-esque episode of his
yeah,
life.
yeah, no, that was really interesting, and well, of course, he comes from a notable family, and his brother,
Right.
and there's all that
Yeah,
stuff. So I
that's
mean,
a big. Yeah, there's a story there.
but I mean, that being said, yeah, I mean, Joaquin wouldn't be my first choice. I would generally, even though we're doing Brittany because even she's sort of, well, she's released we've got a time birth. She's just released a memoir. It's going to be a little easier to do. But like, if instead of doing Joaquin and Ridley Scott, I'd be more inclined to do Marlon Brando and Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, people who've been alive much longer, where there's a bigger sort of tableau to work with, and we have a time birth chart. So yeah, doing one on Josephine. I mean, again, Josephine will come into the Napoleon one. But she was born in the Caribbean, and her data is quite unreliable, as I recall. Yeah, she's from. Let me put up my.
I want to respond to a
Napoleon
couple
file.
of the comments here.
Yeah, please do while
First
I'm
of all,
looking that up.
Cosmic Rose says, "Hey Patrick, looking great today. Wonder why." Well, thank you very much.
He's a handsome fellow.
I'll let you speculate on that. Bliss to be says, "Will you be doing a Patreon or anything like that for Q&As or other off the cuff stuff?" We've had a couple of ideas for something like that. Something we've talked about before is maybe actually having kind of like a watch party of a movie, like maybe we'd sort of give like a little astrological lecture before watching the movie, and then we actually watch it together and comment on it sort of astrologically, I suppose. So we've talked a bit about doing something like that. We'll figure it out. Right now, one step at a time. Right now, we're just trying to consolidate the recordings into a sort of one area and sort of doing it as a sort of official thing.
Yeah. Just to answer the Josephine Bonaparte. I mean, we do have her date of birth. Maybe at some point after Napoleon, we do like a French Revolution thing. I can't imagine doing a whole episode on Josephine because again, we need timelines. Like it's not just a matter like, oh, this person's interesting, let's talk about them. We need to have access to a level of detail about their life. I've got a book about Josephine. Sure, I know, like, her husband's guillotined, and the way she's got to sort of survive with her kids and all that stuff. I mean, she's definitely an interesting figure, but I can't imagine doing an episode on her. There's not enough detail. Napoleon, there's detail. There's all the siblings. There's the battles. There's Josephine and his other wife, and there's so much with Napoleon. So it's not a matter necessarily of just choosing people that we think are interesting. It's certainly not a matter of choosing people that we like or dislike. That's really kind of irrelevant. Yeah, we're talking about doing Scorsese, and like for film directors, I'm more interested in covering people like Coppola and Scorsese, where the timeline is a lot more detailed than it is for Ridley. I'm a huge Ridley Scott fan, but I just can't imagine doing an episode about him. There's not enough detail. Coppola, there is certainly, because there's more drama. You can get into the whole Apocalypse Now filming and the whole Godfather filming, and like we have the breakdown of like the shooting days of those movies, so we know typhoons wrecking sets, or just the stuff that would happen when he's trying to make a movie. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. But yeah, maybe an episode on the French Revolution would be something I'd be willing to do, because you could talk about Josephine and the Beauharnais family alongside Robespierre and Olympe de Gouges and all these other Danton and all these other figures, and that would be an interesting deep dive. But any of these episodes, I think that there really needs to be enough to talk about a given subject for 2+ hours. Yeah. Any thoughts?
Well, I was just thinking about the sort of current astrological weather, and one of the configurations that's really coming into action right now, and will be returning a couple of times, is the current square between Mercury and Neptune. Mercury Neptune squares or oppositions or conjunctions, actually, they happen fairly frequently because Mercury goes around the zodiac, little less than a year. But it's only sometimes where we get these periods where Mercury is really scrutinizing a particular aspect with Neptune, where it may go retrograde in a hard aspect to Neptune. And something that I've noticed about this combination, and I've written about this before, is that they tend to be times where, if Mercury represents sort of communication and sort of logic or rationality, that can sometimes interact with in sort of interesting and amusing ways with Neptune, which is the planet that has certain connotations which are kind of antithetical to Mercury, right? Neptune is fantasy and mystery or illusion. So when you put these two things together, you sometimes get tall tales and fantasy fiction and fake news, and you get people whose natal charts kind of align with this complex of sometimes having muddled thinking, or being prone to conspiracy theories, or saying things that aren't always true. And I realize that sounds kind of negative, and there's a good way and bad ways that this comes out, but one of the things I guess I'm sort of expecting to hear as Mercury makes these 3 passes, one of them retrograde, 2 of them direct, makes these 3 passes in a square to Neptune, is that we would see this rise of stories in the media, or just even on your newsfeed, about people making statements that don't correspond with, let's say, reality, or are kind of unwise, or somehow deceptive or fraudulent. And the past incidents of this, and the past figures I found who have these kind of combinations in the chart, seem to really display these in really kind of clear ways. Now, for full disclosure, Nick has Mercury square Neptune.
Hey, now.
So I don't want to be, too vicious here. A lot of people have Mercury Neptune hard aspects. And like I said before, there's, good ways and bad ways that can turn out. But before we kind of get into some of the examples of this and get an idea of what we might be able to expect, is there anything you would have to add, Nick, about Mercury square Neptune? And how do you think you've witnessed this in your own chart, in your own life? I mean, I can think of a couple ways, but I figured I'd ask you first.
Yeah. Self-analysis put me on the therapist couch here. Yeah, I think certainly as a kid, I mean, children have vivid imaginations, but boy, was I like, I was pretty serious about play and kind of like a little uh, uh, dictator with my childhood friends, trying to set up elaborate play games and stuff.
Well, your
Uh,
Sun square Neptune as well, right?
I am Sun Square Neptune as well. Um, I think the other thing is I mean, in my case, it's Mercury is sending the square to Neptune. The Sun's sending the square to Neptune. I think a little different when Neptune is sending the square to Mercury. In my case, I mean, I think of the Mercury Neptune square in my chart mostly. Like if I think about it, what it means to me, it's my approach to astrology. It's the fact that I don't go for a lot of the sort of the Neptunian flowery jargon. I know it sounds like kind of a put down. I don't mean for it to be a put down. It's just I have a long list of words that I feel are overused in astrology, and I never use them. Like they're forbidden words on my lexicon. Words like
What, you
energy.
don't think? Yeah, I was gonna say, what about energy?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm talking about like the Tesla's horoscope and the fact that he's you know Wardenclyffe Tower and all that, and he's finding ways to generate energy, then I'll use the word energy in an astrological context, but not. Yeah, I don't. I think it's
I recognize that astrology obviously has like kind of uh profound sort of spiritual implications. It's not the focus of my work, and it's not
yeah,
I'm still interested in kind of the mechanism of it and how it kind of works,
yeah,
and the just establishing that it works. The obviously, those things are worth talking about, pondering about. It's just not a focus of my work, and I've
yeah.
appreciated that about
Yes.
your work. Your work is esoteric rather than exoteric.
No, my work is exoteric rather than esoteric.
Pardon me. Yes, I got it
Yeah,
reversed. Pardon me. Yes, correct. I was going to say that about you as well, that if Neptune represents sort of the imagination or the our tendency to think of to be sort of non-rational about things, then I would think that Mercury squaring off and against Neptune, especially in a more positive way, can be someone who uses logos in some ways against Neptune, using sort of logic and documentation and uh, sense, to counter um, kind of the path of least resistance and the tendency to just sort of wash over sort of inconsistencies or inaccuracies. So I think basically Mercury square Neptune isn't just the fake news promulgator; it can also be the fact checker. And I think that that certainly makes sense for what you do. And I think we can. There's a few examples I can think of where that sort of applies as well. So,
yeah. There is that sense. Sorry to interrupt.
oh no, no, go ahead.
The sense that, I mean, Mercury square Neptune can be the lies, but it can also be the clearing the fog. It's a double edged sword. In July of 1799, Mercury was square Neptune. And that's when they discovered the Rosetta Stone. For going to the Napoleon movie, I haven't seen it yet, but I know it features the part in Napoleon's life where he brought an army to Egypt. What is it? I don't know if they show this in the movie, but the Sphinx was dug up to its neck. They dug it out. Like, Egypt was completely mysterious to uh, um, 18th century Europeans. They knew nothing. And Napoleon brought these scientists and well, we would call them archaeologists today, but archaeology didn't really exist. He was kind of inventing it in this month. But they found the Rosetta Stone in this month, Napoleon's researchers, while they were there. And I mean, the Rosetta Stone, talk about, for those of you who don't know, it's a stone that has text in hieroglyphics, but then text in Greek, the same text. So it allowed them for the first time to translate hieroglyphics. So really, like, just it's unearthing this dead written language, this written language that had been dead for millennia, suddenly was resurrected. Yeah, I mean, and then of course, they stole a bunch of artifacts and took them back to the Louvre, and where they remain. That's the unfortunate part of it all. But certainly, like the upside of it is that they did dig up the Sphinx. We started sort of learning about ancient history, which no one really knew about. Certainly not Europeans. Maybe local Egyptians knew more than others. But yeah, so I think that's a great example of Mercury square Neptune uncovering, clearing the fog and finding, finding something concrete out of the unfathomable.
Right. I was just going to bring up a kind of a probably a more well-known example of this in action would be if you look at the date of the 2000 election. A lot of people remember that as sort of a classic Mercury retrograde type of election. But I would also say that another reason why that particular election was so confusing in its aftermath is because Mercury was going retrograde opposite to Neptune in that time.
Wait, opposite?
Not opposite. Pardon me. Square.
Square. Yeah, that
Look at me making Mercury Neptune mistakes. Yeah, I'm natal Mercury retrograde. So, so yeah, Mercury was retrograde square Neptune at that time. I don't know if you want to bring up the transfer for that. And I thought what was interesting about that is that tells us then that there are going to be certain elections where Mercury Neptune hard aspect might be more possible. And so what's really interesting is if you look back at the election of 1876, that was one of the other most contested elections in US history. And that was when Mercury was opposite Neptune, when it was in Taurus. So we have these like two, really standout sort of controversial elections because of there being sort of a mystery of how many votes each one had. That's like this is sort of a mercurial issue, is counting and voting in elections. But then Neptune is this fog that seems to make it hard to discern what the truth is or what the numbers really are. And so I thought that kind of struck me, when I first saw that kind of connection between those two elections.
Right.
Actually, another election where we had Mercury square Neptune with Mercury kind of being close to a retrograde was actually in 2012. And what was interesting about that is that was right around the time that Neptune was actually making its second ingress into Pisces. So it was like Mercury in early Sagittarius square Neptune and Pisces. So very similar to the one that we're having now. And what was really interesting about that is there was this Hurricane Sandy, which hit the east coast of the United States and, basically closed down a lot of cities in that time. And that really complicated the voting, which was happening for the 2012 election. Another really strange thing that kind of happened in that time was Chris Christie, kind of in the law, in the sort of final stretch of the 2012 campaign, despite being a Republican, he's like photographed sort of like hugging Obama and seemingly sort of like betraying, his party in his embrace of the Democratic president and not sort of giving some sort of throwing some sort of bone to Mitt Romney, the GOP candidate for that election. And we actually have a timed chart for Chris Christie. So we know that Mercury would have gone retrograde right back into like the end of Scorpio, which would have been his first house. So I thought it was really interesting that it was that time frame was when he kind of was a turncoat of sorts, as Mercury was going retrograde into his first. And
well, I mean, he's good at that. he's you know what I mean? He's flexible.
Right.
How many times has he been like Trump's right hand man, and then Trump's nemesis, and
Nemesis,
then
yeah.
Trump's right hand man again, and then his nemesis again. It got that happened a few times there.
Right.
But one thing I want to point out is while Neptune was in Aquarius, it was actually fairly common to have elections where Mercury was square Neptune, because typically the elections are happening in November, and Mercury is going to be around Scorpio, so it's going to be kind of squaring Neptune during that time. So the 2006 election, the midterm, when people sort of turned against Bush. Finally, that was Mercury square Neptune. That Schwarzenegger was reelected. This is when Sarah Palin was elected governor of Alaska. There was a lot happening, and of course, the Congress turned around against Bush. So, that was something from that era. Whenever, when Neptune was in Aquarius, you were going to have a lot of elections where Mercury was square Neptune. So yeah, you had it in the year 2000, and you would have it in 2006 and 2012. But it's not, now that we're in a period where, Neptune's in Pisces going into Aries, you might get some squares at inaugurations as opposed to elections. So yeah, I mean, some of that is just the nature of Neptune's slow transit. I'm sure back when Neptune was in Leo, you would get something sort of similar on the other side.
Speaking of politics, that kind of speaks to some of the other potentials of Mercury Neptune, which is if Neptune is sort of like unreality, Mercury is speech, well then fictitious speech or propagandistic speech might be something that you might expect from like a Mercury Neptune interaction, or being able to present things in a very glossy way, being able to create the slogans that kind of implant themselves in people's minds, and sort of like almost like mind control or hypnotism. So in some ways, I would think a Mercury Neptune aspect would be really good for someone working in like advertising or something like that. So if you look at the chart of, say, why don't we just go right to it, just so we can get out of the way. One of the most hilarious examples of this is Donald Trump. If you want to bring up his chart, just to show the sort of specific situation he has with Mercury and Neptune.
Sure, just a moment here.
So Trump has Mercury in Cancer, square Neptune in Libra. And, he is sort of, regardless of what one thinks of him, he is someone who, pardon me, has struggled with the truth.
That is generous.
I think, part of it might just be from not knowing what he's talking about half the time, but a lot of the other times it seems like he's just kind of inventing, the reality that he wants. And so his speech is extremely challenged here by just untruth. And
remember, Justin's mother slept with all the Rolling Stones.
Right. So what's interesting is you can see his Mercury is like just like even like 1 arc minute outside of the 3-degree range. So in theory, even though Mercury is in superior position to Neptune, in theory, Neptune is technically hurling rays back at Mercury, which is this kind of weird concept from Hellenistic astrology, where if you have a planet in a superior square to a planet in inferior position, the planet in inferior position will gain a brief advantage when the planet in superior position approaches the 3-degree mark. It seems a little counterintuitive, because you'd think that would just be the maximum point of overcoming, but instead it sort of reverses. It's kind of like how a planet is sort of weakened when it's combust, but when it's extremely close to the sun, it's empowered by Kazimi. So you can see here, he's basically just over 3 degrees. It's like literally 1 arc minute away from being 3 degrees away from the exact square where Neptune is like hurling rays back at Mercury. And so he's kind of experienced both good and bad things from that, though.
I just want to point out his Neptune he was born less than 3 days before Neptune stationed direct. Now, we don't think of outer planets making phasis, but it's
But
definitely yeah. But
that's
it's a Neptune that's virgin. Like it looks like it's retrograde, but it's really sitting still, is what it's doing.
it's that's a great point, because
Yeah,
that would distinguish why
yeah.
his would still stand out. This is someone who is especially kind of uh mm, prone,
Well, I mean,
to
come on, he's taken it to a new level. I mean,
take it to a new level.
everyone's told a lie, everyone's exaggerated, but
This guy is like the
yeah, but it's
champion,
it's
of
not, yeah,
champion of lies.
yeah, no, it's,
Uh,
but the other thing about the Mercury Neptune square is, to praise him with faint damnation, or damn him with faint praise, whatever the case may be, he is a master tweeter. I mean, holy moly.
well,
And that's like
like I said,
taking it
for a
right to the masses.
salesperson,
Yeah.
for someone in advertising, this can be a good aspect, because it can show a way, like someone who can create
Oh
a
yeah.
message that gets under people's skin, or implants themselves in their head. I mean, this is how he has a bunch of like
Get
cultists.
everyone to buy these hats that are made in China with a
Right.
patriotic slogan
Yeah.
on them.
Yeah, no, it's like the mesmerizing,
Yeah, yeah.
mesmerizing words, the most beautiful words. I use all the best words. Well, I mean, in a way, yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
He just
you
speaks at a
gotta,
fourth grade level, and makes it as simplistic as possible. So he is he's kind of like the Mercury Neptune par excellence. I'm actually reminded a bit of what Alan Oken, I think, said about Mercury Neptune hard aspects, which my mom always told me. She said that he says someone with Mercury square Neptune speaks with a forked tongue. Sorry, Nick. But I think that makes sense for
Oaken had it in for me, man.
but here's the thing, just in case you think I'm being, just anti-Trump, I mean, bring up Barack Obama.
All right.
So Barack Obama also has Mercury square Neptune. And he has the slightly more positive version of this, where Mercury is in superior position to Neptune, but it's outside of that 3-degree range. So in this case, Mercury is sort of triumphing over, the ideals of Neptune. So this is someone whose speech, rather than sort of falling victim to Neptune's fancifulness, this is someone who can kind of overcome, or in some way is in a position to overcome that sort of complex. And if we think about Barack Obama, I mean, his birth, even his birth records, his documents, were a conspiracy theory promulgated by the other person we just looked at. you know, and Barack Obama, his even though he has some positive ways that he exhibits that, in terms of being someone who tries to sort of cut through, or be superior to, I guess, sort of conspiracy theory peddlers and stuff. He was also very slick in his own, messaging, and he, instead of, Trump kind of preyed on people's fears, right, and nightmares with his speech, whereas Obama kind of appealed to people's hopes and dreams. He sort of had a similar knack for being able to, present himself, and to be able to present a message which, is also Neptunian, but just a completely different sort of character. In many ways, very different from Trump. So it's interesting that even between two really different characters, we can see that same Mercury Neptune complex, working in similar and different ways.
Yeah, I mean, there can be a real way with words, which both of them have in their own way.
Right.
Yeah. I always think of Neptune being the masses. Uranus is sort of individualistic, and whereas Neptune is about the masses, like the global masses, or the masses in ways that we only know about in the contemporary world, like just really sort of large groups of people.
Right.
And so, you know, any sort of aspect to Neptune indicates, you know, some level of interaction with the masses.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The my other, like, probably my absolute most favorite example of a Mercury Neptune square, though, in the more sort of negative sense, is Alex Jones. Do you
Oh,
have his chart? Do you want to
I
bring
do.
it up? It's just the most perfect example of a Mercury Neptune figure possible, really. If you don't know who that is,
Lucky you.
lucky you. He's basically this guy, you know, who's made his career off of just saying, you know, insane things, basically.
That's funny. I was sure I had him.
He he's sort of a well-known fake news promulgator, conspiracy theorist. You know, I mean, it's hard to even narrow down. It's hard to know where to start with some of his most notable lies, but probably the most consequential one for him was his assertion that, you know, the what was it, that the Newtown shooting, like, wasn't real, and that it was all like crisis
Sandy Hook.
actors and
Sandy
Sandy
Hook.
Hook, and that you know, and no one actually died, and, like, instead, like, you know, yeah, a bunch of kids were shot,
Yeah,
and
that was. I mean,
it's just horrific, like,
yeah, that's a whole other level of
of
terror.
nuts. And so he was sued by you know, the parents of those children, and so now he, like, has to pay over this incredible amount of money because he obviously was on the hook for that. I mean, he, you know, wasn't getting out of that.
Well, but also there he keeps saying he's broke, but
Yeah.
they find out he's got money hidden here or there or whatever.
So we don't
Uh,
have his birth data, like, we don't have his birth
no,
time, but you can see here, even without his birth data, he was born with Mercury in its fallen sign of Pisces, uh, in a very close square with Neptune and Sagittarius. So he kind of has the inverse of what's going on right now, where we have Mercury
and he was
in
born 4 days.
Sagittarius,
He
Neptune
was
in
born four
Pisces.
days before Mercury went retrograde.
Yeah, so he was born on that end of the Mercury Neptune
Yeah, so
Mercury cycle.
this is a Mercury that's about to go retrograde and square Neptune two more times after his birthday. So
This is
he's
just
he's
someone who can be led
and he's
along.
and he's probably had that progress square probably both times by this point.
Yeah.
So he's born with it, but he's had two progressed Mercury Neptune squares, most likely. I'm
Yeah.
doing the math in his head at this point, in my head rather. At this point,
Now,
he's almost 50.
in 2018, there was a Mars retrograde in Aquarius, which
Yeah,
is, as Nick has noted, that's one of the rarest of the
it is
Mars
the rarest. Yeah.
retrogrades. And that was, I believe, when all of this stuff went down with him getting basically deplatformed from
Okay.
Facebook. In fact, I think it was uh,
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I remember when it was happening. I wasn't
right.
covering him at the time, but that would imply that he's probably got a diurnal chart. Like that's the kind of knowing a detail like that is like if we're doing a rectification, I'm like, okay, if the Mars retrograde in his sun sign did that to him, then he's probably got a diurnal chart.
Yeah, so on August 6th, 2018,
Yeah.
if you
Okay.
want to put the transits up on that,
Yeah.
it's like August 5th or August 6th that he was finally kicked off of Facebook. Now, this was for something else. I think this was like for what they called like hate speech against Robert Mueller at the time. But you can see here that that's, you know, with Mars retrograde in Aquarius, this is like
Right.
just after a lunar eclipse
Hmm.
conjunct Mars in Aquarius. We know that I think when Saturn went over his sun, that's when like the judgment was finally handed down about how he had
Right.
to pay back the families. So the transits through, you know, we see like Mars going retrograde in Aquarius, and he has like these really big repercussions, you know, for his actions. And then, you know, the Saturn transit to his sun when he, you know, is finally ruled against in the Sandy Hook case. We can kind of see like, okay, so malefics, doing things in Aquarius, is a bad deal for Alex Jones,
Mm.
um, and restitution for everyone else. Some measure of justice, but
Well, yeah, I mean, no, I mean, yeah, I don't think there's any way to justice when your kids have been killed like that.
yeah,
But
no,
but
I
I
mean,
get you.
yeah, it's just the idea that you can't say whatever you want. And that seems to be the big problem for Mercury, Neptune people sometimes is if they suffer from this type of Mercury, affliction, then and I'm trying to, I've been trying to think about what is even the best thing to say, to someone who has a Mercury Neptune, because I think because another really good example of the Mercury Neptune complex isn't just like fake news and conspiracy theories, but I think it would be also be good for fiction writers, for
Mhm.
sci-fi writers, um, people who can live and write and communicate in the world of one's own making. That could also be a good way to look at that placement,
Yeah.
and a good way to use it. So, like an example of that would be, oh yeah, so Neil Gaiman, we actually have
Oh yeah,
a chart. We have a time for him,
we do.
and he was born at a Mercury retrograde, Neptune conjunction.
He's got away with the fiction.
He's got away with the fiction. you know, he it's good that someone like Gaiman, someone with his sort of chart, is doing the kind of job that he does. If he was supposed to be like a journalist or something, that might be an issue. But the fact that he's a fiction writer, that is a much better pursuit for him, given
Right.
his Mercury. I gotta say, it's also hilarious to me that it's in Scorpio, because if you've read any of his comics or stories, they're very um Scorpio like, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. That's a safe thing to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed the Sandman
Hmm.
TV show on Netflix. I thought that was amazing. My kids have loved Coraline for ages. The American Gods TV show is pretty cool. Um, he's really into his he one sort of common theme of his work as well, as he loves to sort of relate he writes about mythical figures. He's writing about gods, and sort of really plugging in very consciously into uh, mythical archetypes. And I think there's something sort of Neptunian, I suppose, about that.
Mhm.
um what else was I gonna say? Go ahead.
Oh no, nothing.
Um, I was just going to say another, so another propagandist whose chart might be worth looking at is, and this is kind of a tricky one because, again, we're not sure exactly about the day that he was born, but Putin, if
Oh,
we're, if it's correct to say that he was born on
October
October 7th,
1950.
1952,
Right.
then he has a Mercury Neptune conjunction. And of course, he is a
Well, he
well
was
known.
KGB for years. I mean, I
I
like.
mean, he's kind of the mastermind behind, Russia's feats of deception. He's manipulating elections from the shadows and boosting puppet candidates, and, doing these sort of disinformation campaigns, and doing this in other countries as well as his own. So he's kind of he's got this ability, or got this.
Yeah, I mean, even before he was president, though. I mean, he was in the KGB. I mean, that's just it. It's just business as usual. The KGB basically took over the Soviet government round about 1982 when Brezhnev died, and everyone who followed Brezhnev, had some kind of links to that KGB connection. They're basically the only people left from the old regime. So yeah, I mean, even when he was stationed there in East Germany, as a lowly KGB agent. He was involved in all kinds of acts of subterfuge and what have you. Sending weapons to Africa, and there was all kinds of stuff going on during his tenure. So yeah, I mean, he's totally cut out for that.
Wow. Yeah, that's so I think there's something kind of to this. A slightly more slight an example that's a little bit of a stretch is the chart of Lance Armstrong. If you don't remember who that is, he's the guy who was responsible for that mid 2000s trend of everyone wearing those yellow Live Strong yellow bracelets, which are probably now in landfills. He was the guy who
Brutal.
he was this champion cyclist, and turned out that he had been doping for years, and he denied it, and eventually came out that he was this he'd kind of been a big fraud, and had sort of led everyone along this sort of lie, I guess. Those and we can see that Mercury, it's in a pretty
somewhat wide square.
It's pretty wide square. But even if we weren't considering it to be a good Mercury example, I think just the fact that he was born with like Jupiter conjunct Neptune is interesting, because if Neptune is deception, then Jupiter conjunct Neptune would be like grand deception or grand delusion, and it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all fake either.
No, I mean, he had cancer surgery. He was a cancer survivor. I mean, to give him some credit, even though he was juicing, the fact that he did what he did, even under somewhat false pretenses, he did do it.
Right. Do you have something to say about his Mars?
Well, his Mars is just coming out of the retrograde. He was born the same month that Mars stationed direct in Aquarius, that same rare Mars retrograde that you get. Before 2018, the previous time was in 1971. Yeah, he's born 9 days after Mars went direct.
So that definitely speaks to his his status as a champion athlete, but
sure.
I think the Saturn stationing opposite to the Jupiter Neptune, and Saturn stationing square his Mercury, speaks to the possibility of like the downfall of the illusions in the grand pictures sort of created by his successes. It's kind of got that sort of tragic element to it.
Yeah, it might also, the Saturn's also square the Mercury, and it might speak to something about his medical troubles.
Sure.
Having only one of something that you're supposed to have two of. That's a Gemini.
My God. Well, sorry, I didn't know if you meant that as a joke or not.
Well, I mean, I guess I said it in a funny way, but it's still it's true,
Yeah, I mean, otherwise you had it in the bag, or at least one in the bag.
Oh no. See, I wasn't trying to now you're telling jokes. Sorry, folks. We're naughty sometimes and childish. No, but I was trying to make a somewhat serious point, even though I made a little remark. Saturn in Gemini is, you do get these twinning of things,
right.
So yeah, I mean, I was trying to speak matter of factly, but I guess
right.
So last week or 2 weeks ago, we also had some issue with talking about testes, and we're just trying to, we're grown ups, we can have these grown up conversations, but I wasn't trying to.
Right. But what's interesting is this whole Mercury Neptune thing. It even extends to things that aren't people. Like if you look at the inception chart for Wikipedia. Wikipedia.com was started on January 13th, 2001 at a Mercury Neptune conjunction in Aquarius, which is so funny because it's literally the encyclopedia that you can't quite trust.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the subject.
Yeah.
If there's safe subjects, it's okay. It's good to have. I always say, it's a fine place to start an investigation, but it's not where you want to end your investigation. If you know what I mean, like,
Right.
like you start, you read a Wikipedia article, but then you go and you read books, you watch documentaries, you read news articles or feature articles, and so as a jumping off point to learn about something you don't know much about, it's fine.
Generally, the more obscure the topic is, the more of an expert you'd have to be to even comment on something at all.
Right.
The more reliable sometimes the information can be, just because the number of people who even know anything about that topic is,
Right.
they're only going to be people who
Look, full
resist.
disclosure, as astrologers, we're personally gate kept. We're personally sort of not allowed in that world. So there's a bit of, there's some personal hard feelings, but on most subjects, it is generally good. But yeah, it's something that's always sort of in need of improving or expanding or.
Right.
And yeah, you definitely, you can't just sort of outright trust it.
Right. I think it's also interesting too that it's the world's first sort of decentralized encyclopedia, and it's in Aquarius, the sign of Aquarius. I think that's kind of interesting, and that it is sort of it's a non-profit, rather than a sort of for-profit entity. So that's sort of Neptunian as well, I guess, in a way, because I think it's kind of close to a Sun Neptune conjunction in Aquarius, I believe. That date was
January 13th.
January. Yeah, January 13th, 2001. Oh, so the sun was still in Capricorn. But yeah, the closest conjunction there is Mercury conjunct Neptune, and with Mercury in a loose trine to Jupiter as well. So instead of a Jupiter-Neptune trine with Mercury on Neptune.
I'll just show it quickly, just the
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a time chart for this, but just go on.
But you can see how close, that Mercury.
Yeah, no, that's a very close conjunction.
I mean, sure. So that's Wikipedia, which I just, again, I think it really highlights that idea of like knowledge or, information is Mercury, but Neptune kind of creates this sort of potential field of uncertainty or illusion, that can sometimes make the results or what Mercury says sort of muffled or unsure or uncertain. And so you sometimes see those kinds of themes, emerge from these times where Mercury is square Neptune. Another example that comes to me is the whole Jussie Smollett saga. He was the guy who pretended that he had been the victim of a hate crime that hadn't happened, and that all sort of coincided with that Mercury retrograde in Pisces conjunct Neptune in Pisces. And I believe he has a Mercury-Neptune opposition in his natal chart. So Jussie Smollett, I believe we have a time for him. I think he's Gemini rising.
I thought I had him. I keep finding. Sometimes I think I had
June 21st, 1982, at 4:40 a.m. in Santa Rosa, California.
June 21st, 1982.
Yeah,
he's born the same day as Prince William.
That's funny. So he has the sun and moon opposite Neptune. Mercury's in a sign-based opposition to Neptune, but the height of the whole Jussie Smollett affair, as it were, was the Mercury retrograde in Pisces, conjunct Neptune in Pisces, and that's when there was this big story about something that wasn't even real, sort of had the appearance of maybe being real, but was not. And so sometimes you do see that with Neptune things. It's like fraudulent messages. So it's don't be surprised even the next few weeks, as Mercury goes retrograde and station and hits the square to Neptune again, and that Mercury runs into it again, that we see these kind of stories of people saying things that aren't true, or having to retract things because they're not true, or sort of controversy surrounding truth or bias or deceptive language, propagandistic messaging. There's going to be those types of things to be aware of, and to I wonder what sort of weird conspiracy theory might sort of emerge in this time as Mercury continues to make these successive squares with Neptune.
Mm. Yeah, I can see the opposition there. It's really interesting if you look at just a bi-wheel between Jussie and Prince William. Like they're born the same day, but Jussie's on the Gemini side and Prince William's on the Cancer side.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, no?
Yeah. Blue Jay Blue says, I must be the only honest Merc square Neptune native. LOL. I mean, that's the thing is...
Excuse me.
It's tricky. Sometimes, like we said before, it can also be the fact checker. It can be the person who stands against, Neptune nonsense.
Yeah.
But it can also sometimes be the mouthpiece. So you want to be the mouth. You want to be the fact checker, not the mouthpiece of disinformation. Fear God says, what about Neptune trine Mercury effects? What do you think about that, Nick?
Yeah, I remember having something about Mercury trine Neptune ages ago. Let me try to refresh my memory here. Here, I'll show you guys the search I'm doing. So this is Mercury trine Neptune. I remember I had something for this. It's been years. It's really, that's the interesting thing about doing this is having to think about stuff that I had a lot of thoughts about ages ago, and having to sort of, wait a minute, I had something.
No worries. While you're looking for that, I would just say that I would assume that since the trine is supposed to be a more positive aspect, and because it's supposed to relate to like a more open line of communication between the two planets involved, that it would just mean someone who maybe is open to the mysterious or illusory or fantastical, but not necessarily controlled by it. Someone who can positively interact with these things. Like I would think that would again be very good for a science fiction writer or something along those lines.
I'm seeing people like Ricky Gervais, Woody Harrelson, Matthew Broderick, Rosie O'Donnell, Star Jones. Oh, Star Jones, that's funny. 3 days younger than Rosie O'Donnell. And I'm kind of laughing. There's not one but two members of Iron Maiden have Mercury trine Neptune. Like the whole the fantasy element. It's not just a rock band. There's a whole character and costumes and all that kind of thing. People like Dana Carvey, who's just like really gifted with impressions.
Right. Yeah. To mimic.
Yeah. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
A lot of musicians here. Eddie Van Halen, the great. Neptune rising with this Mercury Neptune trine.
Wow.
Definitely the first time I heard that guy play on a record, that blew my skull open. Definitely a lot of musicians in here. Fewer politicians with the trine. Brian Eno,
that makes sense.
Yeah,
the politicians seem to have the hard aspects, right? Because they're more likely to say things that aren't necessarily true. Whereas, musicians, writers are looking to maybe, inspire or
And everyone from like Barry Manilow to like your punk rockers. I saw a number of punks down here. So yeah, Danzig. For those of you, I look into the Misfits if you don't know who he is. But yeah, a lot of just sort of Nancy Spungen, the Vicious's girlfriend. That's another one.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Let's
that's what I would say. Probably the same thing about Mercury sextile Neptune, but
yeah, for sure, for sure.
uh, but it wouldn't necessarily be as maybe as cool as the trine, right? Um, I have Mercury sextile Neptune, and I don't know that it's terribly significant to my chart. I don't know that it like leaps off the page. You know, I'm not a very big conspiracy theory kind of guy. I'm very wary
Yeah,
of these, you know, like in many ways, like astrology is almost like as far as I go, you know, as like with weird things. Although I also, you know, I guess the one like once is conspiracy theory, I think I I uh I guess I have a bit more invested in is the idea that I think the US government probably does like know a lot more about what the UFO phenomenon really is, that really is something very strange. And
yeah. We've
you
talked
know,
about
we talked about that. We talked about our experiences with that. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's not really a conspiracy theory when you've experienced it.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, it was until we did see it. I'm the same way. It took me a long time, but I am a believer that John F. Kennedy was assassinated through a conspiracy. That one is has just grown. The evidence has just grown and grown and grown.
hmm.
Um,
I don't
but
know enough about that to really to know, you know, whether it is just a prosaic assassination versus a
right,
conspiratorial one.
right.
Um,
Well, um,
but I know that it's been talked about for a very, very long time. And
yeah. I mean, I think after like Oliver Stone's movie was kind of baffling and not very good, but what it did do was it pointed out that the records were sealed and would not be opened until like decades later, and people were like, well,
why?
why? Yeah, like
That's
why
very
can't
strange.
if there's nothing, and so that there are all these petitions to um, um, you know um, um, reveal those documents, and things have been forthcoming. We do know a lot more. I think my favorite, what I would say, just the last word, I don't want to get involved in this now.
Yeah, sure.
At some point we'll do an episode on Kennedy, and I'll talk about the astrology of that. But if anyone wants to read a good book, do you remember Richard Belzer, the comedian? He was on Law and Order. He was also an actor on Law and Order.
Oh no,
Richard
I
Belzer.
never watched that show.
Okay, well, he's a very famous comedian and actor. He just died earlier this year,
Oh,
but he wrote a book called Hit List. And all Hit List is about all the people who were supposed to testify to either the Warren Commission or the House Assassinations Committee, but died before they could. And it's a whole book because there's dozens of them. It's like 77 different people who were supposed to testify, but died before they could. And
hmm.
there's a whole book just about that. And you know, good
Yeah, I
read,
mean that's
good
pretty
read.
weird.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, yeah, it is
it,
pretty weird.
when you know this story, when you know just how many people had something to say to these committees and didn't make it. And yeah, out of the 77, there might have been two, three, four who genuinely had heart attacks or car accidents or whatever it was, but it's a large number of people. A
Yeah,
very, very
that's very strange. And but I guess my other question would just be, well, why why Kennedy? Why, you know, was he going to do something? Was he
Oh yeah,
going to
yeah.
say
No,
something?
yeah, yeah. That's the other thing that a lot of these subsequent investigations have found. He really was serious about pulling everything out of Vietnam like that month earlier. 3 weeks before Kennedy was assassinated, the South Vietnamese president Diem was assassinated, and Kennedy just realized like, okay, we've been supporting this corrupt regime that the people don't actually want. Let's pull out. And then there were other things. The CIA was planning a coup in Indonesia. which came out in horrible fashion in 1965. He
Yeah,
was gonna he was
almost
gonna
all of the almost all of the conspiracy theories involving like things the CIA has done, like
yeah,
you
no,
know, like that. Those usually end up being like true.
well, that's just it,
You
you know. Well, that you know, the other thing is Kennedy had fired the head of the CIA, Alan Dulles, and then when he's assassinated, LBJ puts Dulles at the head of the Warren Commission, and Dulles is the only one on the Warren Commission who doesn't have another job, so he's winds up being like the main guy in the Warren Commission, the guy who was fired by Kennedy from leading the CIA. It's like you couldn't get a better
Weird.
setup. Anyway, I just want to show you guys the cover of this book. I really, again, you know, without getting into you know, single bullet theories or any of the other conspiracies, this book, Hit List by Richard Belzer, is a really great read. You know, verifiably factual, and just raises a lot of questions, just like how the hell did how you know, how can you have that many people die in such a short period of time?
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Anyway,
this is
I didn't mean to turn this into, I didn't mean to turn this into a big Kennedy thing, but since it
yeah,
came
yeah,
up,
yeah. I think my favorite conspiracy theory, aside from the one about birds not being real, is the one about the moon not being real, and that
yes, yeah,
the moon landing didn't happen. What I think
right,
is especially hilarious about that is the number one people who would be the most motivated to want that to be true would be the Russians. And you know, the Russians did not dispute that it happened. You know, if
yeah,
there was any hint that it might actually have been faked, they would have said that.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
but
yeah,
they didn't. And
yeah,
yeah, it happened. The astrology shows that too. You know, it was literally the moon conjunct the Jupiter Uranus conjunction at the time of the landing. I mean, it was, yeah, this happened. But um it's yeah, it's interesting sometimes seeing the kind of tall tales that Mercury tells when it's in these aspects with Neptune, and sometimes they're fun, you know, but other times they get in the way of getting to the truth of things. And sometimes when you think you have the truth but you don't actually have the truth, then it, you know, you get these sort of problems of Mercury, Neptune. But
yeah. Look,
yeah,
I promise we'll do an episode on Kennedy. There's some really interesting astrology there. With Kennedy, like Napoleon, one thing I like apart from all the other stuff is they both come from families with a lot of siblings. You know, both Kennedy and Napoleon had 8 siblings, and I really enjoy, you know, looking at family charts, large family charts like that. So the Jacksons are another one that we'll do, where we look at siblings. So yeah, when we cover Napoleon next week, we'll do all the stuff with, you know, Josephine and the French Revolution and the battles and all that interesting stuff. But we'll also look something apparently the movie totally leaves out, is his siblings. The Bonapartes, you know, that's a family story. He's just one brother out of these 9 siblings, and they arrive as refugees in the middle of the French Revolution, and it's a really, really interesting story. So yeah, hope you guys will enjoy it when I tell it. So yeah, and the same thing I'll do with Kennedy is look at the whole, all the Kennedy siblings relative to John and Bobby and Teddy, and so on and so forth. All right. How you feeling, Patrick? You strong? You good?
yeah, pretty much. I
Yeah,
mean, I've said about as much as I can say about the Mercury Neptune square. So we maybe can move on to a different topic if you want.
yeah, yeah.
Or unless you have anything else you want to add about Mercury and Neptune.
Not particularly. No, no. I try to, you know, forget that I have it natally.
No, I don't want people to feel bad about it.
No, no.
You know,
I know. I think
I've been
you're
very
absolutely right.
negative.
I'm absolutely someone who wants to like clear the fog no matter what. I mean, this is what got me into astrology is how the hell is this thing real? And everyone, you know, people believe in any number of things, but this thing that's just like observedly, visibly a thing, a real thing, not
Yeah,
just something in my head. How is this real? And everyone thinks it's a joke, and yet people believe in a lot of stuff that is a lot more sort of tenuous or shaky than
Well,
astrology.
then maybe it's really appropriate then that we're starting this. We're kind of relaunching or officially branding these talks as the astrology live stream. As Mercury is in this kind of configuration with Neptune, or we'll be coming back to it because you kind of have this natally,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I've noticed this with myself that when Mercury is like conjunct Pluto, because I was born with Mercury conjunct Pluto, I seem to like that's when I write some of my articles that like hit maybe harder, or that's when I'll be like. I remember one time I was invited to go on the astrology podcast at a Mercury Pluto conjunction. I didn't plan that ahead of time at all. I ended up talking about Mercury Pluto, and a bunch of the things I said on that podcast sort of ended up being really relevant for that time period. So yeah, these recurrence transits are kind of
they're powerful.
they're a pretty big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah. Also, I see what I do as a kind of storyteller. And I think Mercury square Neptune is a great storyteller, whether it's fact or fiction.
Right.
Just, being able to tell it a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mercury Pluto folks digging up all the internet conspiracies. I'm not as I don't know. I feel like I was a lot more of a keyboard warrior a few years ago. I feel like I really mellowed out just because I just
well, you have to eventually. You have to eventually. I mean,
I cannot police every bit of nonsense on the internet.
No.
It's a Sisyphean struggle.
Yeah,
and,
I gave up over a decade ago. I mean, I gave up in the aughts. I mean, I found that every time I spent arguing with someone about anything was time better spent, doing more research, looking at more astrology, getting ahead in what I'm trying to do, rather than chasing my tail in some silly argument with someone who, I'm not going to convince them. They're not going to convince me. No point.
Congo Coffee in Toronto Beignets. I think that's Nia. She says,
Nick, your Mercury in detriments? No, my Mercury's in the first house conjunct a royal star, yo.
Yeah, you have a pretty powerful Mercury, like no joke.
Yeah. I don't know where
your Mercury's better than mine. Mine's retrograde conjunct Pluto. I mean, it's kind of wild, but it's I don't know that it's the best Mercury you can have.
Look, if I'd been born a day later, I'd have Mercury in Virgo, and that would have been nice.
Would have been unstoppable.
Yeah, I would have really been unstoppable. But I can overpower a conversation. Well, we get this all the time. Every time when Patrick and I go on the astrology podcast together, one of us gets a complaint for it constantly interrupting the other guy. And last time I got the complaint. The time before that, you got the complaint, and then I got the complaint last time.
So
it
happens. Yeah,
it happens.
And I'm happy to let you have center stage. We're gonna let each other. We have two soloists, and we're trying to.
Yeah, we're jazz musicians. We're jazz musicians here. So one guy flies solo, and the other guy sort of backs him up, and then
snorting lines.
We switch.
Yep.
Snorting lines.
Jazz musicians. Go on.
Oh,
all right.
No, that's no. Jazz musicians. It's cannabis or heroin for jazz musicians. Right. They do not do coke. You cannot play jazz on cocaine. Plenty of reefer, plenty of smack. But yeah. Anyway, and not that we're smacked out or anything like
that. What? Okay, we have a lot of comments here. Nia loves you.
That's good.
So, all right, Help Me 100 says 0 degrees Mercury here in Gemini. I believe I could talk with any person, even as challenging. I'll do it or say something eventually. Face red droopy eyes. Mercury at 0 Gemini. I mean, even when it's not the ruler of the ascendant, people with Mercury and Gemini just seem to be chatty.
If you want word to get out, tell someone with Mercury at 0 Gemini. Tell them, don't tell anyone, and then everyone will know. Everyone will know. Um,
uh, what else? Everyone else saying here?
Congo Coffee says the first 30 minutes in the Eclipse episode with Chris, where Nick didn't want to talk, I was like, Nick, it's your time to shine. Yeah, no, that was by design, Congo. Chris was trying to prompt me to speak, but I wanted him to get through the introduction quickly because we had a lot to cover. So my point was like, Chris, just do the introduction. Then when we get into examples, then I'll shine. So it was easier to do that. But even Chris got on my case for, not chiming in that first half hour. But I thought it made sense. It was efficient. It was a good use of the time to let him do the intro. And then we got into the examples.
Bliss to be says, what's the relationship between Moon Neptune? That's a more confusing one to me.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to lunar stuff, it's automatically more sort of subconscious and less sort of overt or demonstrable. It's more sort of inside. The one thing I think the Moon and Neptune have in common is they're both bodies that speak to the masses or the people. It's about sort of the people around you. The Neptune's just sort of like a really super powered version of what the Moon represents in that regard. So I think it has a lot to do with the people around an individual, the masses, or the people in the person's hometown, or whatever the case may be.
I'd say the Moon also has this traditional component of being kind of a physical signifier. It's traditionally signifies like the body itself. So sometimes if like the Moon is conjunct Neptune, then it might show someone has maybe a particular sensitivity to, say, certain allergies or proclivity towards pharmaceuticals or allergic reactions to those things, sort of a heightened sensitivity to foods and chemicals or medicines. It can also, since it's about like instinctual reactions to things or habitual reactions, it can be people who maybe like withdraw into their own sort of inner worlds to find safety or security. They can also be people who, and this seems to be common to people with Sun Neptune and Neptune Ascendant and Moon Neptune, that they can also sometimes be the projection of other people's idea of them. People who kind of end up being seen as something that they may not feel like they personally are. And I guess there's always going to be some degree of discrepancy between the way you're seen by others versus the way you feel by yourself. But it seems like with Neptune, there's this real there's like definite difference between like the sort of glamorized, photoshopped, social media ready version of yourself versus who you really are in person. So if I see Neptune if I see Neptune with the Moon, I just might know that like appearances really can be deceiving, and that you really can't judge a.
Can I show you a Moon Neptune thing?
Yeah.
Fairly recent story. Will Smith has Moon conjunct Neptune. And when he slapped Chris Rock on the Oscars, remember, Moon Neptune is about the masses. It's the people. And it's Will Smith's sixth house. And he's at this very public event. And, South Node is reactive. You know what I mean? South Node doesn't have a plan or a design. It responds. Will Smith, I'm not going to defend what he did, but I don't think he went to the Oscars with plans on slapping Chris Rock. It's something that just sort of spun out of control, and it happened, which is a kind of South Node-y type of thing to happen. And Will himself is a Sun South Node, person. So you do, the things like this, with the square from, to the Aquarius planets, so on and so forth. So that's just, that's one example I think of with Moon Neptune is
Well,
it's yeah,
uh,
the people, the crowd, the
well, I would think even beyond that. Remember, I mean, if Moon and Neptune is like you can't judge a book by its cover. I mean, it's so funny to me because the kind of the sort of the stereotype about Will Smith is that he was like really bland and family friendly and very safe. There are those jokes by Eminem, made
yeah, sure.
against Will Smith, and there's the Family Guy jokes where he's rapping about how you gotta like respect your elders and do your homework, you know,
Parents just don't understand. Yeah.
and it's so there's been this public perception of him as being kind of very like wholesome, family friendly, and then that's like torn down by this like you know completely outrageous like subversion of this idea. And it's like, wait a sec, we did not know who this guy really was.
Right. Like
And
like that was something that we might have expected, I don't know. Well, there are a lot of other celebrities I would have said, would be more
would
likely
do
to get up.
that. Yeah, I would
Yeah,
not have
would do
thought
that.
Will Smith. Like Will Smith is like,
Yeah,
oh, Will Smith's cool, he's not gonna do anything like that.
yeah. I mean, Russell Crowe. Like if someone said, "Oh yeah, Russell Crowe might do that," I'd be like, "Yeah, okay." He can kind of lose control. That makes sense, and it would be kind of in keeping with his persona. There's a number of people like that you kind of expect.
Here's another example. I hope I'm not leading anyone astray here with this one, because there is a little question as to whether or not they were born in this year. But this is the chart of Hetty Lamar, who is
Why do you think Hetty Lamar wasn't born that year?
because it's in the source notes. Her rating is A. But there's some question about if she was born in 1913 or 1914.
Oh, she's
Uh,
definitely born in 1914.
so yeah, if that's
Oh,
what
yeah.
that's the kind of the that's most likely true. But I just wanted to point out, assuming she is born in 1914, then it's quite interesting that with the ascendant in Cancer, the ruler of the ascendant would be the moon. So the moon, in this case, pulls double duty in terms of representing the ascendant and in terms of representing the body. And so she has the moon in conjunct Neptune and Leo. And this is someone who was known as like the
The
most
most beautiful
beautiful
woman in
woman
the
in the
world.
world.
Yeah.
Right. And she had this very ethereal, very glamorous mystique, this allure of old Hollywood, also old Hollywood star. But what's so interesting about her is despite being this like big movie star and sort of sex symbol in the
She
culture,
invented the cell phone.
yeah, she invented way shortwave
Frequency hopping.
frequencies, yeah,
Yeah.
frequency hopping, which was used in World War II. And she was this kind of scientist, and was completely not what one would think of her. So she had a lot of projections sort of put on her, as this sort of glamorous sex symbol, but like who she really was obviously a very curious and intelligent person. That there was a real departure from the kind of caricature that existed of her in popular culture. So it's really so that's what I think of with Moon Neptune, is that you can't judge a book by its cover, and that this is a person who maybe appears to be one way but may be very, very different in reality.
Yeah, no, that's a really she's one of my great favorite charts to look at. Her story is so fascinating.
Yeah,
She's Austrian. She was in this Austrian movie in the 30s where she's naked and she swims in a lake or a pond, and that was really you didn't have
it was a well,
you
not
didn't
just that. She actually had like an orgasm on camera for the
right
movie.
yeah
I think
yeah yeah.
she's in like 16 or something. I think it was during a Venus retrograde that happened.
Well, she's a red too. She's born during Venus retrograde or very close to Venus retrograde. It
So
I think
yeah,
Venus is
16
either
would make sense.
yeah. Um, well, the movie came out in 33. Yeah, it's called Ecstasy.
Hmm,
And she was 18 when it came out. So yeah,
okay.
it might have been filmed a little earlier than that. So she made that movie, which was sort of scandalous in itself. But she's Austrian, and she was married to this Austrian munitions not dealer, but like this guy who made weapons for the Nazis. And she was often at these dinner parties with her husband and these high-ranking Nazi officials who would be talking about weapons technology. And she would
Right.
just have to sit there and look pretty,
Yeah.
I mean, I love just sit there and be the trophy wife. While her husband and these Nazis talked about, the weapons technology, and she learned just by like from these conversations. And so, yeah, eventually she ditches the husband.
Escapes and
She gets on a boat for America and actually meets Louis B. Mayer on the boat, as I
yeah.
understand it. And like, one of those like, oh, you should be a movie star. And she already is. And I've even got recently Samson and Delilah movie she was in the 50s that I want to watch. One of those great Cecil B. DeMille epics. But yeah, she's just absolutely fascinating human being. So yeah, she goes to the States. She becomes an American movie star. She's in a movie called Algiers, where the character who would inspire Pepe Le Pew is from that movie Algiers.
Oh,
Like
wow. Okay,
a
didn't
guy
know
who
that.
chases that I forget who it is, Charles Lawton or someone like that. Whoever it is, the actor plays like a Pepe Le Pew type character chasing after Hetty Lamar in this movie Algiers. So that when Mel Blanc was creating the character of Pepe Le Pew, he was doing the French movie character from that movie Algiers. That's a little side trivia.
Speaking of which, he was born on the day of a new moon in Gemini. Just want to point that out because, like Dana Carvey, a great impressionist, both sons in Gemini.
Yeah, no, Mel was the best. I actually went to his tombstone in
Man
Hollywood.
of a Thousand Voices.
Yeah. And his tombstone literally says, "That's all, folks." On that.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, I spent like 25 minutes just sitting at his tombstone.
Wow.
So she goes to a dinner party. War breaks out, and she goes to a dinner party, and she meets this film composer named George Antheil. And George Antheil knows he worked a lot with those player pianos.
It was kind of an experimental musician.
Experimental music, which was great for cinema. But he knew a lot about the technology for player pianos. Those rolls, you put a piano roll and the piano plays itself. And that somehow his knowledge of doing of player pianos and her technical knowledge, the two of them collaborated and came up with this frequency hopping idea, which is the technology that was used eventually in cell phones and GPS and things like that. So it's a big deal. And her son is a president of one of the big cell phone companies. That's ironic enough, but I guess that's well deserved.
Right. So Moon Neptune. That was the reason I brought up her chart, is that she's kind of like Will Smith. Isn't who you would think she would be.
What you see is not what you get.
Yeah, that's kind of to me, that's kind of the Moon Neptune thing. But you kind of see that as well with like Sun Neptune and Ascendant Neptune. They kind of get. It's harder for me to distinguish definitively between those, although you can. But functionally, people with like angular Neptunes or Sun Neptune, angular aspects, Moon Neptune, they're going to interface with that complex in some overlapping ways potentially.
I don't know who Johnny Dell is. Who's Johnny Dell?
I don't know who that is. Speaking of which, I mean,
Depp. Okay, Depp, not Dell.
There's going to be I think it hasn't been released yet, but I think Gal Gadot is either going to film or has filmed like a mini series where she's going to be portraying Hetty Lamar.
She's a good choice.
She resembles.
Yeah.
That was supposed to come out a few years ago, but I'm not sure what happened to that. I actually, I do a lot of like musical projects with my wife, and so for a while back in like 2021, we like made kind of like a
musical about
Hetty Lamar, and my wife was going to play Hetty Lamar, but we never got to really perform it because it was still like the pandemic era. Anyway, very interesting. Yeah,
Indeed.
Moon, Neptune. Let's see. What other questions do we have? Oh, okay. Public has turned on Gal Gadot because of her association with the IDF. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, things
Got.
things are changing fast. Things are
Yeah.
changing
All
fast.
right.
One of the
I.
Stranger Thing kids is also being canceled for
Okay.
speaking on behalf of the IDF as
Gotcha.
well. Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't, giving any kind of like endorsement here. I was just reporting what I
Yeah.
remembered about her association with this project, which may or may not even be happening now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thankfully, Pepe Le Pew hasn't said anything about the IDF, but
Pepe Le Pew is getting canceled for different reasons.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. I think that the thing about Pepe being canceled is like the cartoon never makes him look cool. Like the cartoon never makes
No.
it like it's like this is the way to. If anything, the cartoon really underscores like this is how to not behave. But yeah, I guess it's just people don't want to watch it anymore. Fair enough.
Oh, people are. Oh, we have another question about Mercury conjunct the North Node.
Where's that? I don't see this.
That was. Oh, it was way down. GF Martello asked, "How about Mercury conjunct the North Node?" I mean, it
That's
conjoins it once a year, or twice a year, actually.
yeah.
Well, no, the North Node once a year at least, up to 3 times.
Yeah. You there you get someone very deliberate, in their speech and their communication. It's kind of calculating. And I mean, the one thing the North Node does when it's conjunct any planet is it sort of amplifies it. But it's also the North Node is unlike the South Node. The North Node is very conscious, very aware, very deliberate. It's more, whereas the South Node is just responsive and reactive and just, has no agenda. It just does what it does. The North Node has an absolute agenda, more sort of conniving, deliberate, scheming, and if nothing else, just sort of not someone who chooses their words, very sort of deliberately.
I would say because Mercury's so close to the sun, Mercury conjunct the North Node, that would happen somewhat close to, depending on where it is in its cycle, somewhat close to a solar eclipse. So I would assume that maybe Mercury would be kind of giving voice or speaking on behalf of that eclipse if it happened to be close to where that eclipse occurs.
Yeah.
So Clancy,
one here, I'll show one person who's got my idea of what a Mercury North Node person is. I don't have a birth time for this person, but it's not necessary. Christopher Hitchens. Aries stellium with Mercury very close to the North Node. Not a guy I always agreed with. I'd say the last decade of his life, he and I disagreed on pretty much everything.
After the Iraq War, he kind of
exactly. But before that, I mean, before that, I was, kind of, in the 80s, I used to read The Nation. My dad had a subscription and he wrote for it. So, he was a very early sort of political educator for me. And yeah, when he was speaking about history or a lot of other subjects, he was right on the money. I think he let his Islamophobia get the better of him when Iraq happened. But whether you agreed with the guy or not, he was really, really well spoken. Like one of the most engaging speakers you can ever hope to find, and really would dread you would never want to be like up against him in any kind of debate or argument.
No, he was pretty ferocious.
He was very, very good
Of
at that
course,
time.
I feel like you could ascribe a lot of this just to that stellium in general, and the fact that it's in Aries, co-present with this ruler
Sure, but
Mars.
that Mercury's with the North Node, and it's not just any. The Mercury's very likely Kazimi. We don't have a time of birth, but the Mercury's very likely Kazimi. But yeah, just the ferociousness is kind of Aries, but that sort of that really very deliberate articulation. I think the style.
And look at what it's opposed to, right? It's all
Yeah,
opposed to Neptune. That's
yeah.
who we saw as his like enemy, right? His
And he
to
he
the
saw enemies
misguided.
everywhere. Like he was, no matter what, like you were always either like on his side or on the other side.
You're either on his side or you were a total deluded idiot.
Yeah, right, right, yeah.
You know,
That
those
was kind of the thing. Yeah,
in his mind, I think that's
yeah,
kind of how it was. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good example.
My favorite, his book, the Trial of Henry Kissinger, is really really worth reading. He's got a few books that are really worth reading. If you don't go down the anti-religion thing was a bit sort of I mean, it's not. I didn't necessarily disagree, but it was kind of excessive.
It was just part of that post 9/11,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
kind of just reactionary,
yeah,
thing
yeah.
in the West.
And yeah, he kind of lost the plot in the last few years, but still worth listening to, even if you
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
agree
sure.
with him. Like definitely, if anything, it was kind of a gift to not agree with him, because even if you didn't agree with him, he would have much better arguments for his position than anyone else. And that
Right.
that in turn prompts you to think your position. I mean, you always want that in a debate. You
Yeah.
want someone who's
There was this
at
show
least
in
gonna
England.
gonna sort of put you in a position where you're thinking harder and thinking more
Yeah.
about your own position.
There was a show in England called Intelligence Squared,
Yeah.
and they'd have like these debates. And so one of the debates was it was Christopher Hitchens and Stephen Fry on the same
Right.
team, which
Yeah.
is like
Yeah. Yeah. I think
already
I've
like,
seen this.
oh
Yeah.
shit, we had some serious firepower here, opposite like, I don't know, the Archbishop of Canterbury or something. And they were talking about like, is the Catholic Church a force of good in the world? And man,
Oof. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it just stomped them. Like it just,
Oh,
the
have you ever seen?
combined force of their intellects was pretty overwhelming.
There's a debate he has with this very gentle, kind sounding rabbi about circumcision, and he's just he's.
just, just
Have you ever
stop
seen that
it.
clip? I mean, he's
Yeah,
just
I've seen everything.
shame on you. Shame.
Just,
It's just
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's pretty
it's
hardcore stuff. He was
yeah,
fearless, absolutely fearless, and did not
just
give
yeah.
did not give a damn.
But then he had to go all like, the way he went. So I feel like it's
Yeah.
in some ways he's a bit of a. I mean, I'm sure he, would think we're nonsense, if
Oh God, yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Oh,
he
really?
would not give a crap about
Yeah,
astrology,
yeah,
We'd
dude.
be stomped on by him as well.
Yeah, yeah. Let's invite him on the live stream. Yeah, no, he was something else. But I've read a number of his books, and he's worth listening to, even as someone that in the end I disagreed with virtually all his positions, but still like a really useful person to have in your life as an intellectual, whether you agree with him or not. Just to
Blue
sort
Jay
of
Blue asked, did he have a Kazimi Mercury?
yeah,
And
very
no,
likely, very
yeah.
likely. We don't know what time he's born. Hold on, let me just share the screen again.
But on that day, certainly Mercury would have been, depending on your definition. There's the the
Yeah.
Hellenistic definition of less than 1 degree, and the medieval one of like less than half a degree.
So if he was born like 5 minutes after midnight, yeah, Mercury is
Is very close.
25 minutes away, and then if he was born like 5 minutes to midnight, okay, by that point it is kind of wearing off, but still very close.
Yeah.
So yeah, he probably did, but we don't know for sure. There was something else I was going to say about him. Anyway, I forget. Never mind. Being an a-hole does not make you correct. Yeah, no, but I mean, that was the thing is he was never correct or incorrect because he was an asshole. Like, there are times when he's, like when he's taken on Kissinger. What are some of the other books of his I've read?
Sometimes you can be wrong. Sometimes you can be right, but still out of line.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so he was that a lot. Like, even if he was right about something, he's still a little out of line. But
yeah, I think
sometimes
so.
you just couldn't deny, that he made a great point in a great way.
Yeah.
I love that meme. That my different meme where is that feeling, when someone you hate makes a great point. It's very, very annoying.
Yeah. Well, I do.
Says he also had a series of debates with Doug Wilson, the theologian.
Yeah. Those are legendary. I would recommend The Trial of Henry Kissinger, No One Left to Lie To about Bill Clinton, and Blood, Class, and Empire, which is an excellent book about Britain and America. You should read that, Patrick. I would recommend.
Yeah, I'd like to read that. Mentioning Bill Clinton, he was born with Neptune rising.
Yes.
And he's another guy who, in his own way.
The story of Hitchens and Clinton went to Oxford together. Did you know that?
Yeah.
And Hitchens, I mean, this is the thing, is Hitchens had it in for Clinton, even though he was a lefty, but he had it in for Clinton. And my favorite thing is, you remember
an American coming here.
Well, no, Hitch could say he was in the room when Bill Clinton didn't inhale. He was at the same party. And what he revealed was, of course, Bill didn't inhale. Bill's allergic to smoke. Bill would eat brownies. And he's like, that's why he said he didn't inhale. So it's just kind of, that's a funny thing is he starts when Clinton's elected. I mean, he wrote for The Nation. Hitchens was a lefty. But when Clinton was elected, he really turned on Clinton, which didn't make him a Republican, but it made him no one was more sort of hostile, apart from the Republicans, to Clinton than he was.
We can also see with Neptune on Bill Clinton's ascendant that, I mean, I think in some ways it describes some of his kind of charisma, or ability to kind of project, an unrealistic version, of himself. And I think that's something that obviously is kind of a complex situation for him because he has like Venus and Jupiter in Libra and Mars in Libra at the same time. The Neptune thing though is, I think that's sort of what takes it over the top and is what made Clinton the kind of figure that he is. But it's interesting when we consider in terms of Mercury and words and the power of words to, advance one's own interests or to be ensnared by them. It's quite interesting that we can see that
he's got the
Mercury, Mercury is extremely close to having escaped the enclosure by the malefics because Mars is at 6 degrees Libra and Saturn's at 2. So Mercury just passed a malefic enclosure. It's like someone who came really close to having like one's words, be the thing that kind of brings them down. And ultimately, that was what the impeachment proceedings were about. It wasn't necessarily about the affair itself. Strictly on paper, it was about perjury.
Well, again, Hitchens' book is called "No One Left to Lie To."
Yeah, I mean, so he like narrowly escaped this, this potential, of having Mercury kind of enclosed by the malefics. And so, no one left to lie to. He, brought on a lot of his own issues with Mars, the contrary to Sec Malefic in the first house. He kind of became the source of a lot of his own problems in a way. Neptune on the ascendant can do the opposite too, though. Others project their vision onto the native. I mean, so. I mean, Bill Clinton was not as bad as his detractors thought he was, and nowhere near as good as
his fans
his
thought he was. Yeah.
supporters,
No. Yeah, I mean, someone just said he wasn't really a lefty, which I fully agree with.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
he was.
I never, certainly after between 92 and 94, the first 2 years of the presidency, Hillary was trying to get the healthcare thing going. We could live under the illusion in those years that he was a lefty, but then once the Republicans took over, the big 94 election where they took over the House and Senate, I mean, he was suddenly having to, go up against a really, really hostile, Republican ruled Congress. But at the same time, there was nothing remotely left wing about him.
Yeah, well, I think he came about because the Democrats had been out of power for a whole decade because of Reagan. And I think they figured out that like the only way that we're going to be able to win is to be more like them. And
Yeah.
so, that is why and how Bill Clinton, happened, and why someone like that would have been able to kind of fill that role for even someone nominally liberal.
Probably not unlike what the Republicans are thinking right now with the abortion issue. Like, like recognizing okay, we're going to have to find
right
Republicans
but I mean he when he first got into office, the first thing he tried to do was to decriminalize being gay and that in the military, and that got completely shut down. That was like a Mars retrograde story, the beginning of his presidency. And then
right.
And he did try to move the ball forward on health insurance. Did try to move towards. In fact, that's actually one of the big things I'm kind of expecting from this current Saturn and Pisces period, because Social Security came about with Saturn and Pisces in 1935, 1965. We got the big update to Social Security, Medicaid and Medicare, and then early 90s, Clinton tries to pass healthcare but sort of fails. We get Obamacare, the Saturn opposition in Virgo. So then I'm kind of thinking, all right, well, what's the big update now?
Right. Well, Biden's got an election to win.
Yeah. So
which,
maybe Social
spoiler alert,
Security
he won't. But anyway.
Yeah. but it's made me think that Saturn and Pisces this time around
you might have a point.
Another update to Social Security.
Look, when Biden said he was going to, pardon all the student debt, they won that midterm. The so-called red wave that was supposed to happen didn't happen.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, if Biden wanted to win, he would do well to announce something.
Legalize marijuana.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
commute sentences of nonviolent offenders.
Yeah, but I think. Look, guys.
you cause pain
every time I say that the Trump thing. Look, when we get to November, we're going to do a Trump episode. I'm happy not to speak about him much between now and then. When we get to November, Watson and I were saying, okay, we'll do a deep dive on Trump when we get to that point. But look, I try to be clear. It's not what I want to happen. If it were in my power to stop it from happening, I would. It's just the call I've made. But look, I've been saying it for a year out loud. I mean, I've thought it for longer than that. But I think, when I was on the astrology podcast, the Uranus episode, which I guess was October of last year, when I basically said it. And then since then, I've just sort of, said it.
I mean, the weird part is if you read your book, Uranus USA, in some ways it's remarkable that you didn't call it like ahead of time, like even before announced, like someone like that would do it.
There are reasons for that. Like I said, the thing about that book was I made it 84 pages long deliberately because the Uranus cycle is 84 years. And so I left out a lot of stuff, and I knew Trump's chart, but I was like, why am I going to talk about this guy?
Yeah,
I'm talking politics here. This guy's a clown. So I did shoot myself in the foot in that sense, but I put that book out in 2013, so he wasn't
second edition.
I'm working on, I want to get a second edition out for the election. But my point being, look, when I said it a year ago, everyone thought I was just talking crazy. I think everyone at least now can see that when I say it, it's like, okay, like looks like it really could happen now. So, sorry, folks. It's not my fault. I'm just calling it. I'm an astrologer. It's kind of part of what we do. What did Nick predict for 24?
That Trump would win.
That Trump's going to win. That Trump's going to win. And I've been saying it for.
The only thing I'm saying about it so far is that I don't think Biden serves another term, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a Democrat doesn't win or that the Democrats lose. And so I'm kind of waiting on a few things before I can actually more confidently say exactly what I think the outcome will be. But based on like Saturn's transit through Biden's fourth and what that's meant before, like it just makes me think, okay, at the end of his term, I don't know that there's another term. I think, I'm not saying he's going to die or something. I think
someday he will.
Well, yes, but I mean, like, I don't want to, I don't want to throw any sort of fuel on the fire about like his health or anything like that. And that's sort of irresponsible to do. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying that I think that when he serves out the first term, I don't think there's another one. So that could just mean, it's handed off to someone else who's a Democrat. It could mean, the Republican is replacing him.
I think people should just be preparing themselves.
Yeah.
One way or the other. That I think he's getting in. That's it. Sorry. Yeah, I know. I hope not. I hope not. I'll be thrilled to be wrong. I'll throw myself at your mercy and say sorry for scaring the pants out.
When does Uranus actually end? Because doesn't Uranus enter Gemini in 2025?
In mid-May, I think mid-May of 2025.
So that's the only thing that doesn't quite make sense. Is I would think this would happen after Uranus's ingress into Gemini rather than before.
It's close enough. It's close enough.
I was just saying, that's like
inaugurations
in
January. So there's 5 months when Uranus is still in Taurus.
See, I don't know, because what could also make sense, like I've said, I think Trump will be president of his own country. Like he'll be the Jefferson Davis of this iteration of the Uranus and Gemini cycle.
Yeah, and
which doesn't mean of the United States, but potentially of Trumpistan, Trumptopia, whatever you want to call it, Trumpland.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a safe bet that if he didn't win the election, he'd have a whole lot of followers who would be calling for secession, and so
maybe by May of 2025, like a few months after the inauguration,
Okay, look, those early months leading up to May are just rife with all kinds of stuff going on astrologically that I think is interesting.
Yeah.
The Mars retrograde from Leo to Cancer. And then as soon as that's over, your classic Venus retrograde in Aries, Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries. There's
serious.
A lot going on. Everything's changing at once. So I'm not, yes. Okay. Uranus only enters Gemini in May, but I don't think that's the presidential term is 4 years. And who knows, how long he winds up living. Because I think if and when he does get out, there may not be an election in 28.
I think we're going to see his Uranus return, which sounds wild because I know, his health is not like fantastic for a man his age, but I think given the kind of chart he has, I think we will absolutely see what his Uranus return brings. He's going to live at least to that point where we know kind of what it is, and the only thing that would make sense is
I think
to assume this kind of.
I think that's when he dies,
and becomes what an American motto for the New South.
Something he becomes something. Congo's saying it enters July 7th, 2025. Uranus and Gemini. I'm sure it happens sooner than that. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Okay. I think you're right. Thank you, Congo. You're right. It is July. Okay, but still,
all right. This is a really
my point stands. I still say it doesn't matter. May, July, whatever.
This is a really weird callback to last week when we were discussing the Marvel actors, but something I thought about a little while after when we were looking at Chris Evans' chart, you know, he's the guy who, remember how he said that like Gemini and Uranus transit through Gemini is kind of like the star-spangled combination, you know, because it sort of shows up so much with
Sure.
America.
Yeah.
Well, like, so the guy who portrays literally the star-spangled Avenger in the MCU, you know, has this sun at 22 degrees of Gemini, which is like, you know, 1 degree off from you know, the Trump sun.
Right.
You know,
I
the
I got this birth certificate. I went to the Boston Records office.
oh, this is you?
Yeah, I
You
got this one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You'll see my credit somewhere on the page.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Collect
yeah,
the best.
yeah.
The best collector.
Yeah, no, that was a very productive day. I took a road trip down to Boston. I went to the records office and I got a bunch of birth certificates that day, and Chris Evans was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I found the pardon me. I found the process to get birth certificates from the Massachusetts office to be really strange.
Yeah.
You feel like you're in trouble.
or that
like,
or that you've like bribed a guard.
yeah,
you know,
it's like, why is this like this? You know,
Yeah.
this is like an official public function. Why do I feel like I'm doing a drug deal? Like,
whereas Vermont, you literally you go in and there's these, you know, like computer terminals, and you can go in and you can look up every record. You can just wander in and do it. You know, maybe you have to give them your driver's license, I think, when you go in. And Vermont was a cinch, but yeah, Massachusetts is a little weirder. I mean, you do it.
You do it. Yeah, they do it, but they make you feel like, yeah, you shouldn't be there. And if they only knew what you were even there for,
Right.
you know, it's strange though how busy it was too. There were quite a few people like, seemingly doing, you know, all kinds of research in there.
I don't think they're all astrologers. Maybe some of them do genealogy, you know.
So, yeah, I mean, there's so much to say about.
Yeah, I didn't want to get into Trump, but every time I say it,
it's impossible.
People
You
respond.
know, it keeps coming back because it's useful. You know, today, like for Mercury Neptune square, you know, he's a good example of that. You know, why not use that?
Justin's mom slept with all the Rolling Stones.
Oh Lord.
Yeah.
I just
yeah.
All
right.
Anyway,
I think
we're about done.
We're about done. Yeah, I really didn't want to. We're not going to. I'm serious though. When we move forward, we will do a deep dive on Trump later in the year, close to the election. I'm doing a lot of preparation for that. And Patrick already knows his chart and his life pretty well. But I don't mind not speaking about him again until we do that episode, and hopefully we can do that.
Yeah, I'll try to avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think, you know, some people are literally mad at me for saying it, which is unfortunate, but it's not going to make me change. I'm no Hitchens, but still, it's not going to make me change. All right. Who are you, Watson?
I'm Patrick Watson. I'm an astrologer, and you can see my services and articles and data projects. You can see that all on my website at patrickWatsonAstrology.com. Also, from now until January 1st, 2024, you can get 25% off any of my services if you use the coupon code Happy Holidays 23. Happy Holidays, all in caps, the numbers 2 and 3.
Way to wage war on Christmas, Watson.
Happy Holidays 23. If you put that code in at the coupon code at checkout on any of my services, general consultations, rectifications, tutoring, electionals, horries, you can get 25% off. You can also get 25% off on gift certificates for general consultations and rectifications if you use the code Happy Holidays 2023. I had to use a separate password for those. So yeah, happy holidays 23 for all my services. Happy holidays 2023 for all gift certificates. And that's until January 1st. So make sure you take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done. Okay. I don't have anything like that to announce, but yeah, my website is nickdaganbestastrologer.com, and I'm available for services at my regular rates. Well, maybe I need to think about holiday rates. Gee, should I go with the guy who's offering discounts or with the guy who's like stubbornly not? I'll have to think that through.
I can show you how to set it up. It's really easy.
I know how to set
okay,
it up.
Okay, yeah. Just
I've done things like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe next I'll give it some thought, and maybe next week I'll say something about it. But yeah, in the meantime, he's fantastic. So, book him, and the price is a steal. All right. Well, Patrick, thank you so much. This is the last of our, what we're calling these the wilderness streams, right? When these live impromptu streams where we had nothing planned. Just say what placements I'm using to make that prediction, Nick. Simple. Okay, well, there's the long and the short story. I don't want to get into the long story. There is, we can look at the transits for the election. That's everything that
Uranus. Okay.
Yeah.
It's Uranus and Gemini. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the short story.
The short story is it's Uranus and Gemini. Thank you. Everything else, we'll talk about it in November. And I'm sure everyone will still be just as invested in what I have to say then as I am now. Yeah. All right. So
Alrighty.
Cool. Awesome, folks. Thank you, Patrick, as always. And sure my Mercury's not in detriment. Yes, I'm sure my Mercury's not in detriment. Everyone thinks He's got a detriment Mercury.
Yeah, no, he's got a really good Mercury. All right. See you guys.
All right, folks. Have yourselves a great week. I'll do my solo stream tomorrow, so tune in tomorrow at 11 o'clock Pacific time, 2 o'clock Eastern time for my solo stream. And yeah, have a great day. Cheers, guys.